Although my political views can better be described as radical rather than liberal reformist, and my analysis of politics falls within the power elite perspectives exemplified by thinkers such as C. Wright Mills, G. William Domhoff, and Noam Chomsky, I genuinely admire most of Liberalviewer's videos and subscribe to his channel. Like Liberalviewer, I count myself as a fan of the American Civil Liberties Union, and spent several years doing volunteer work for the ACLU of Eastern Missouri as a complaint counselor. It is also worth noting that in spite of the Midwest conservative reputation, the ACLU actually got its start in my hometown of St. Louis. In contrast to the stereotypes, the ACLU members and volunteers I encountered were primarily characterized by their ideological diversity. They were not merely liberal Democrats, though there were plenty of those. During my time at the ACLU, I met Republican voting libertarians, independents who valued personal liberty, and radicals such as myself, who were a minority. Despite my longtime support for the ACLU, I do not agree with it on some campaign finance issues, and felt it necessary to represent the views held by those natural allies of Liberalviewer who oppose the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United versus FEC by creating a rejoinder to Liberalviewer's video entitled, "Is It Just Corporate Free Speech?" Now, without further ado,
Liberalviewer presents.
So based on the comments and messages...
well, let's skip forward a bit.
Finally, and maybe most importantly, while corporations are not actually people, they are associations of people, and those people still have free speech rights, which is, again, why the Supreme Court held that when those people speak, quote, the government may not suppress political speech on the basis of the speaker's corporate identity, unquote. And my agreement with this recent decision by the Supreme Court not only separates me from some of my viewers and some of my friends on the left, but it puts me in agreement with people with whom I don't normally agree.
The notion that our economic institutions are examples of free association must be the most insidious of the various conservative libertarian fictions. A person does not become a bus driver or a maid as a result of free will. She does so out of economic necessity. That remains true even among the relatively privileged and highly educated sectors of the population. A person might major in computer science out of a love of video games and the theoretical work of Alan Turing, only to take a job designing databases for a manufacturing company. An idealistic, first-year law student committed to civil liberties winds up spending her career devising contracts for corporations. Those examples represent the norm. People also have very limited direct influence over their economic and socio-political environment. I may abhor sweatshops, but if I want to wear the clothes that are readily available to me in my economic environment, they are likely to have been made in one. Rights adhere to individuals, and individuals acting in groups they join of their own volition. It is simply not true that a person chooses to be employed in the same way he or she chooses to join a chess club, a church youth group, or the American Civil Liberties Union. Economic institutions have no human rights. Furthermore, applying the Bill of Rights to for-profit corporations leads to absurd and possibly disastrous consequences. For example, the First Amendment prohibits compelled speech. In one notable example, the Supreme Court held that the state of New Hampshire could not force a Jehovah's Witness to drive with a license plate that included the state's motto, "Live free or die." Nevertheless, the government constantly compels businesses to make statements they would certainly not make on their own. Cigarette packs warn of cancer, medications list side effects, cookie packages list calories, natural healing treatments state in small writing that their claims are scientific bullshit. On a similar note, the Fourth Amendment prohibits the government from searching an individual's property without probable cause of wrongdoing. So, for example, the government cannot send inspectors into people's homes at random to ensure that their kitchens are sufficiently sanitary. The government does do that to restaurants, and justifiably so, in my opinion. Since the 1970s, however, the Supreme Court has begun to grant commercial interests limited rights under the First Amendment. The results have been incoherent. It is simply easier and more logical to adopt the traditional perspective that commercial speech is not subject to First Amendment protection, and to accept the broader view that commercial interests are not examples of free association entitled to the kinds of individual rights enshrined in Enlightenment values. Unfortunately, in Citizens United, the Supreme Court appears to have given corporations carte blanche. The decision represents a remarkable expansion of corporate power.
Corporations that are going to want to spend money expressing political opinions are not going to be the big blue-chip firms that want to stay away from controversy and sell to everyone. The people who will most likely be freed up to speak for corporations will be speaking for non-profit corporations like Planned Parenthood, the NRA, and the Sierra Club, a point conservative columnist George Will made in that same ABC discussion here.
Some people say, well, corporations, that means Microsoft will be buying ads. Microsoft's trying to sell software. They're not interested in getting into political fights.
It would be difficult to find a self-described progressive who opposed the rights of non-profit organizations like Citizens United, the Sierra Club, the NRA, or Planned Parenthood to engage in issue advocacy and voter mobilization prior to an election. Non-profits are not considered corporations outside of legal jargon. Nobody would describe the ACLU as a corporation. In Citizens United, however, the Supreme Court failed to draw a distinction between non-profit groups like Citizens United and the Sierra Club and powerful commercial interests like Microsoft and Monsanto. Of course, the distinction is readily apparent. The former non-profit organizations are financed through donations freely made by individuals and private foundations seeking to advance a particular point of view and/or provide a service to the community. The latter for-profit corporations seek to maximize the profits of their investors. Furthermore, the assertion that big blue-chip corporations are going to stay away from the political process in order to avoid controversy is absurd on its face. Laughably so, given the fact that corporations are already actively involved in the political process through their campaign contributions and extensive lobbying. It is not clear why profit-maximizing corporations would finance political campaigns without a foreseeable return on their investments, or, given their already extensive involvement in politics, why they would not make use of their expanded power. Furthermore, if corporate political contributions are a form of civic duty, it is not clear why, even in close presidential races, corporations sometimes clearly side with one candidate over another. Recall the support Enron gave to Bush.
And I think that cute baby demonstrates why for-profit corporations are generally going to be interested in, well, profit, which won't come from making partisan ads, but of course that's not to say that corporate money doesn't already have a big warping influence on the way political decisions are made in America, but that has more to do with the lack of a public financing system for campaigns than it does with any independent expenditures by outside groups.
Surely corporations will continue to conceal their substantial role in the political process through various front groups and trade associations. Of course, most corporations are reluctant to enmesh themselves in inflammatory social issues, although some clearly do. However, given the fact that the overwhelming majority of legislation has absolutely nothing to do with social issues, the point seems irrelevant. Corporations are not interested in providing goods and services, they are interested in maximizing profit. If Microsoft can maximize its profit by offering new products and services, it will offer new products and services. If Microsoft can maximize its profits by pressuring our political institutions to radically expand copyright law, it will pressure our political institutions to radically expand copyright law. It is doubtful that even most highly educated people who closely follow the news could cite more than 4 bills passed by Congress in a given year, a gross overestimate in my view. On the other hand, Congress routinely passes hundreds of bills each year. In 2006, for example, Congress passed 482 bills. It is reasonable to assume that the vast majority of the population is unaware of more than 1% of the legislation that comes before Congress. That is not true of most corporations, who have strong financial incentives to monitor bills that come before Congress and to influence the legislative process to benefit their interests. So, for example, the Telecommunications Act passed by Clinton, largely forgotten by the public and passed without much controversy, gave away billions of dollars worth of public airwaves to private telecommunications firms. The public is also unlikely to recall the repeal of Glass-Steagall, also under Clinton, which paved the way for a recent economic debacle. I obviously believe that corporations have a big warping influence on the way decisions are made in America. Furthermore, I believe that such influence is painfully easy to demonstrate. Granting commercial interests freedoms under the Bill of Rights should be resisted as a matter of principle. Although I agree that establishing a public financing system for campaigns would represent a step in the right direction, the influence of commerce on the political process is pervasive and will remain so for the foreseeable future. Corporations continue to wield significant influence over governments, even in nations where public financing systems are already in place. In most cases, governments act as de facto corporate lawyers and lobbyists in international forums such as the WTO. Mild reforms will not change that. What is required is a fundamental restructuring of our economic institutions. Dick Wolf.